It is time for Week 10 of the 2021 MLB Power Rankings, and that's what I'm going to do in today's video. But before I get into this video, 88% of you in the month of May are not subscribed to the channel, so get your life together. Hit that subscribe button, turn notifications, and leave a like on this video. Subscribe, turn notifications, and leave a like. Yes, that's 88% of you that watch these videos that are not subscribed, so get your life together and hit that subscribe button. And let's go ahead and get into this video with Week 10 of the 2021 MLB Power Rankings. At number 30 this week, I've got the Arizona Diamondbacks, who finished at number 28 last week. The Diamondbacks are just not a good baseball team. It's simple. The Diamondbacks, I didn't have high expectations for them coming into the season, but I think I had better expectations for what they've been so far this season. They're currently 19-36 on the season, 15.5 games back already of the division. 1-9 in the last 10 on a one-game winning streak, and that's just because they're coming off a 13-game losing streak. 10-14 at home and 9-21 away from Chase Field. So as far as you looked at the runs scored versus the runs allowed, that's very big here, because for their runs scored, 237 compared to 286 runs allowed. That's a big deal right there. You can tell that the pitching's just not been very good, which is definitely the case with this team. Madison Bumgarner's not been good, just as we expected, over a 5 ERA from him. Morel Kelly has not been his 2020 self. They just have really not had good starting pitching at all this year. Zach Gallen's been on the injured list. They just have not had good pitching. Now, what their record would be expected win-loss record based on runs scored and runs allowed would be a 22-32 record. So a little bit better. But still, they're 3-18 versus just 500 baseball teams, which is a big problem as well. That's probably one of their biggest problems. You've got to win the games versus teams that are 500 or below, and they're just not. And the Diamondbacks are not a good team. They're going to be sellers at the deadline, you would assume. Probably trading Ketel Marte. Eduardo Escobar's honestly been their best player this year. Madison Bumgarner, no way any team's trading for him with that terrible contract. So I'm interested to see a little bit what this team does at the trade deadline. At number 29, another NL West team, Colorado Rockies. The NL West is one of the best divisions of baseball, but still, two of the worst teams in baseball, in my opinion, are in the NL West. The Rockies have a 20-34 record right now, 5-5 in the last 10 on a one-game winning streak. 228 runs scored versus 271 runs allowed for them as well, at a negative 43 run differential, and a 23-31 projected record, expected win and loss record based on runs scored and runs allowed. 16-12 at home and 4-22 away from Coors Field, 9-25 against 500 teams. There's a clear problem here with the Rockies. For one, their offense is horrible. Their pitching is not much better in the ballpark that they play in. They're a horrible team. They're the Rockies, after all. At number 28, I've got the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles are actually on a 14-game losing streak right now, and they were at number 27 last week. 17-37 record right now, worst in all of baseball. 0-10 in the last 10, obviously, on a 14-game losing streak. 202 runs scored against 270 runs allowed, and a negative 68 run differential. 20-34 is their expected win-loss record. And 6-19 at Camden Yards against 11-18 away from Camden Yards. 14-28 against 500 teams. The Orioles are a bad baseball team. Simple enough. At number 27, Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates here. 20-32 right now. 3-7 in the last 10 on a one-game losing streak. 175 runs scored this season against 249 runs given up, and that equals out to a negative 74 run differential. 18-34 expected win-loss record based on runs scored and runs allowed. They had 10-15 at PNC Park and 10-17 away from PNC Park, and 11-20 versus 500 baseball teams. Next, at number 26, I've got the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers have been playing a little better recently, but 4-6 in the last 10 is, quote, better for this team on a one-game losing streak. 22-32 record right now. That's considered better, like I said. 194 runs scored this year versus 249 runs allowed. Their offense is horrible. Negative 55 run differential. And an expected 21-33 record is their expected win-loss record. And they're 13-15 at Comerica Park and 9-17 away from Comerica Park, and 15-21 versus average baseball teams. So they've actually been decent versus average teams, but still, the Tigers are bad. At number 25, Washington Nationals. This is another team that's just really, I think, is one of those that needs to really sell at the deadline. Just like I think with the Chicago Cubs, what they need to do. They're currently 21-28 right now, 4-6 in the last 10 on a 4-game losing streak. 185 runs scored this year against 209 runs allowed, and that equals out to a negative 24 run differential. They have had injuries this year, which kind of does, I guess, give them an excuse. 13-15 at home and 8-13 on the road, and 8-16 versus 500 teams. That's no problem there. I think they just have a World Series hangover problem. I think they've just kind of got too much into their head about that 2019 World Series. And yes, the 2019 World Series is a huge achievement for that organization, but still, I think they need to trade their pieces at the deadline. Yeah, Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, Josh Bell, big offseason pickup was supposed to be there. He's been horrible. Number 24, Texas Rangers. They're 22-33 right now, 3-7 in the last 10 on a 6-game losing streak. 221 runs scored versus 256 runs allowed this year, and a negative 33 run differential. The expected record would be 24-31. 13-13 right now at home, and 9-20 on the road, and 14-23 versus 500 teams. The Rangers, they've got Adolis Garcia, who's going to be a big piece of their future. I don't feel like people are talking enough about him, and I'll talk more about that in tomorrow's video. Number 23, Minnesota Twins. They actually moved up 7 spots from last week. They're 22-31 right now, 7-3 in the last 10 on a one-game winning streak. 246 runs scored this year versus 267 allowed, and a negative 21 run differential. 12-17 at home and 10-14 on the road, and 9-19 versus 500 teams. The Twins are playing a little bit better, but I don't know if they can really come back with their season, and I still don't think, even if they didn't have such a bad start, that they would even be close to the caliber of the White Sox. At number 22, Los Angeles Angels for the second consecutive week. They're 24-30 right now, 5-5 in the last 10 on a one-game losing streak. Mike Trout's out. I mean, this team's frustrating, obviously. I could rant about them, but I just don't expect much from them at the deadline either. It's the Shohei Ohtani show right now. That's basically it for this Angels team. Honestly, Jared Walsh, like I said, has been surprising this year, but still, the Angels are a very, very frustrating team, in my opinion. Number 21, Cincinnati Reds. They stay at the same spot as last week as well. 24-28, this year's record for them. 5-5 in the last 10 on a 2-game winning streak. 256 runs scored against 272 runs allowed, and a negative 16 run differential. 12-13 at home and 12-15 on the road. The Reds, I definitely think, could be a bit of a surprising buyer at the deadline, considering that I don't think it's even the hitting. I think that they could also buy and sell at the deadline, where they could possibly trade Luis Castillo and maybe even Sonny Gray and get some prospects back for them and some other players, and they could possibly make a run. Their bullpen's horrible. It's horrible. Their pitching as itself is not very good. Their hitting, though, is great. So if they can get some pitching, which coming into the season, you wouldn't think the pitching would be the problem, but it is. Number 20, Seattle Mariners. They moved down 2 spots from last week, where they were at number 18. Seattle's 28-27 right now, a positive record, actually. 7-3 in the last 10 on a 5-game winning streak. 208 runs scored against 250 runs allowed, and that's negative 42 run differential. 17-12 at home and 11-15 on the road, and a 15-17 record versus 500 baseball teams. Yes, they've got a decent record. They're 2 games back of the wild card right now. They're playing pretty good for Seattle Mariners standards. I still don't believe in this team. I'm just going to be honest. I do not believe in this team at all. Their pitching's not very good, nor is their hitting. Their hitting is honestly just not very good. And as good as Jared Kelenic is, I just don't know. I just don't believe in him. 19, Miami Marlins. They actually finished in the same spot last week as well. But the Marlins are 24-28 right now, 9.5 games back, 6.5 games back at the wild card, and 5-5 in the last 10 on a 3-game losing streak. 201 runs scored this year against 191 runs allowed. That's a positive 10 run differential. 12 and 12 at home and 12 and 16 on the road, and 11 and 18 versus 500 opponents. Number 18, Kansas City Royals. They moved down one spot from last week where they were at number 17. They're 25 and 26 right now. But I think we could say that the AL Central is probably the worst division in all of baseball right now, and that's basically why. 6 and 4 in the last 10 on a one-game losing streak. 211 runs scored this year against 234 allowed. Negative 23 run differential. 12-13 at home and 13-13 on the road. Number 17, Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies, I can't bump them down too much, but they just have a lot of injuries, and that's why they really can't be bumped down too much more. They're playing decent with the injuries that they have, honestly. I mean, they're currently 25 and 29, 6.5 games back of a wild card spot, 3 and 7 in the last 10 on a 3-game losing streak, 15 and 10 at home and 10 and 19 on the road, 14 and 17 against 500 opponents. I mean, for the injuries that they have, they're doing okay. They're not doing great, but they're doing okay. The Phillies, I will be interested to see what they can do once healthy. And is the NL East even going to get it together this year? The whole NL East has been a huge disappointment, and it just has. I mean, you would think one team at least would be stepping up, but that's just not been the case. Yes, the Mets have been, I guess, okay, but still, for the Mets coming into the season, not the same, honestly. Braves. Or the Braves aren't the next team, actually. Brewers at number 16 this week. Can move up 4 spots from last week. The Brewers here are 8 and 2 in the last 10 on a 5-game winning streak, 29 and 25 record, 203 runs scored against 215 runs allowed, and that's a negative 12 run differential. 13 and 14 at home, and 16 and 11 on the road, and 17 and 9 against 500 opponents. And that's really where they're staying into contention. Now, with the Brewers team, I think that they definitely – I think Willie Adames is going to help them out a little bit, who they got in a recent trade. But I think they still need more hitting, honestly. I still don't think that the hitting they have now is good enough to – I still don't think it's good enough to beat the Cardinals in that division, who are playing pretty well right now. Next team at number 15, Atlanta Braves. They've been hovering around here for the last few weeks because they're just not good right now. 24 and 26, 5.5 games back, 5 and 5 in the last 10 on a 2-game losing streak. 243 runs scored this year versus 245 runs allowed, negative 2 run differential there. 13 and 14 at Truist Park against 11 and 12 away from Truist Park. With the Braves, they're always 5 and 5 in the last 10-ish. That's always them. Austin Riley has been very, very good this year, and I'm very happy with the production from Austin Riley this year. The pitching's horrible still. They've literally got no pitching, and I think Richard Rodriguez has to be dealt to Atlanta at the deadline. I could see their deadline being towards their 2019 deadline, because if I remember right, they got Mark Melancon, Shane Green, Chris Martin, all those pitchers that offseason, and I think that would be a huge deadline. I don't think it's just going to be Richard Rodriguez that does anything. I think a lot of people will assume that Richard Rodriguez is going to be the solving main factor for this team, and that's just not going to be it. It's going to have to be more than Richard Rodriguez. It might even have to be Cesar Valdez as well, and more relievers. At number 14, Chicago Cubs, who stay at the same place. I still don't believe in the Chicago Cubs a bit. I'm just going to be honest. 30 and 23 right now, 4 games back in, 1 game back in the wild card, 8 and 2 in the last 10 on a 1-game winning streak, 45 runs scored this year against 213 runs allowed, and that is a positive 32 run differential, 19 and 10 at Wrigley Field against 11 and 13 on the road. They are currently, they're currently tied for first place in their division. If you're a Cubs fan, I think you really have to be happy with this season so far. Craig Kimbrell's been good, but I still think that there's probably even more motivation now for them just not to deal their pieces at the deadline, which I don't particularly like, but still, it makes the NL Central more competitive, and they need that, honestly. Number 13, Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are just outside the top 10 this week, as they were at number 12 last week. 27 and 25 right now, and they're playing in a very tough AL East. I would probably consider it the best division in all of baseball. 4 and 6 in the last 10 on a 1-game losing streak, 261 runs scored against 219 runs allowed, and that's a positive 42 run differential. Their projected record would be 30-22, and 10-11 at home, and 7-14 on the road, and 15-16 versus 500 opponents. The Blue Jays have been, I think you could say, pretty good, especially without arguably the best player in George Springer, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. obviously has been a big part of that. He's lived up to that potential. He's been very, very good this year. He's been very, very good. Hyun-Jin Ryu's been good. The Blue Jays, especially when George Springer comes back, are in a good spot. They still do need to make some moves at the deadline. Could we see Max Scherzer going to Toronto or Dunedin or Buffalo or wherever the heck they're playing? I think it's Buffalo. But yeah, it doesn't really matter where they're playing. Number 12, New York Mets, who move up one spot from last week. 25-20 right now, 3.5 game lead in the NL East. They're 6-4 in the last 10 on a 4-game winning streak. 161 runs scored against 159 runs allowed this year. That's a positive 2-run differential. 15-5 at home and 10-15 on the road. They're very good at Citi Field, and they're 2-10 versus 500 opponents, which is just not very good at all for the Mets. The Mets are a good team. They're a good team. They still have not lived up to the potential, and I still honestly would put them in the disappointing category this season, but still, they lead the NL East. At number 11, Cleveland baseball team. They finished here last week as well. And they're 28-24 right now. The White Sox are building a lead in the AL Central. 4.5 games back right now. 5-5 in the last 10 on a 1-game losing streak. 206 runs scored against 215 runs allowed and a negative 9 run differential. 12-12 at home and 16-12 on the road. They're honestly, I guess you could, they're better than Francisco Lindor's new team that has more talent, which is pretty sad. Number 10, Houston Astros. They moved down 4 spots from last week. 4-6 in the last 10. They are on a 2-game winning streak, but still. 29-24 right now, only half a game back of the AL West, and 284 runs scored this year against 227 runs allowed, and that's a positive 57 run differential. 18-12 at home and 11-12 on the road, and 19-13 versus 500 opponents. And number 9, the St. Louis Cardinals, who lead the NL Central right now. They were at number 9 last week as well. They're 30-23 right now. Like I said, tied for the NL Central. I'm just going to say they're leading the NL Central. But 5-5 in the last 10 on a 1-game losing streak. They started to kind of fall off a little bit. 15-10 at home and 15-13 away from Busch Stadium. 7-12 against 500 opponents and 229 runs scored against 225 runs allowed. And that is a positive 5-run differential. At number 8, the New York Yankees. Yes, they still got swept by the Detroit Tigers, and that's not good. I probably should move them down, honestly. I could move them down. I still probably should move them down. Actually, yeah, if you get swept by the Tigers, I think I'm going to move them down. I think I'm going to move the Cardinals, Astros, Cleveland, and Mets will move up a spot, and I think that the Yankees should probably place at like number 12. It's a change here, but I think they could nicely be put at number 8. But still, there are some big problems with this team. Like, you just cannot deny the big problems with this team. And it honestly doesn't matter where they are this week in the power rankings. But here's the thing. I probably would put them at, like, number 12. Maybe I should have changed that, but I didn't. But still, for the Yankees, they're in third place right now, 29-25, already 5.5 games back of the AL East, 4-6 in the last 10 on a 4-game losing streak. 202 runs scored against 194 runs allowed, and that's a positive 8-run differential. 15-12 at Yankee Stadium and 14-13 away. So the Yankees very interesting here. They need some help with the bats. I think Ketel Marte is a great option. People that are saying Joey Gallo, that's stupid. That's absolutely stupid. Joey Gallo is not the answer for this team. He just contributes to their already enough problem of players striking out. He doesn't help the problem any. He's just more power when they need a better hitter, which is a player like Whit Merrifield, a player like Ketel Marte, who's going to hit for a high average. Number 7, Oakland Athletics. They were at number 5 last week. But for the Athletics, they're 31-25 right now. 4-6 in the last 10 on a 3-game losing streak. 231 runs scored. Gets 242 runs allowed this year with a negative 11-run differential. 17-17 at home and 14-18 on the road. They still do lead the AL West. They have fallen off a little bit, honestly. I think the Astros still will win the division. At number 6, San Francisco Giants, who are currently first in the NL West, 34-20 right now, 6-4 in the last 10 on a 4-game winning streak. 261 runs scored this year against 192 runs allowed. That is a big difference this year. That shows how good their pitching is. Plus 69 run differential. 34-20 exactly would be their expected record. Based on runs scored and runs allowed. 15-7 at home and 19-13 on the road, and 9-10 against 500 opponents. Next team at number 5, moving into the top 5, Chicago White Sox. The White Sox are 7-3 in the last 10 on a 5-game winning streak. 33-20 right now. 20-9 at home and 13-11 on the road. 266 runs scored this year against 184 runs allowed and plus 82 run differential. I still think the White Sox possibly will make a couple moves at the deadline. I think that would be probably to add some veterans to this team because this is a fairly young team with not a lot of postseason experience, honestly. So I think adding some veteran players would help as well. And still, I still think that they definitely have a shot at making the World Series. At number 4, Boston Red Sox, who moved down 2 spots from last week, who are 7-3 in the last 10 on a 1-game losing streak. 269 runs scored this year against 224 runs allowed. And that's a plus 45 run differential. 31-22 would be their expected record, and 32-21. 2 games back of the AL East, the Tampa Bay Rays are really playing well right now. 16-13 at home and 16-8 on the road. Boston, it's really Alex Cora that I think is the big change here this year. I think he has helped them a ton this year. And I think he's the main reason for the Red Sox being as good as they are. At number 3, I've got the Los Angeles Dodgers, who were number 1 last week. But the Dodgers currently are 3rd in the NL West, 31-22 record, which is still a very, very good record. 2.5 games back of the NL West, 6-4 in the last 10 on a 3-game losing streak. They got swept by the Giants. 273 runs scored versus 205 runs allowed, and a plus 68 run differential. 17-19 at Dodger Stadium against 14-13 on the road. That's their big problem right there. They still rank at number 3. At number 2, Tampa Bay Rays. They move up 5 spots from last week. The Rays could easily be number 1 next week. They're 35-20 right now, and they have the best record in all of baseball right now. 9-1 in their last 10 on a 5-game winning streak. 273 runs scored against 210 runs allowed. A plus 63 run differential. 34-21 would be their expected record with their runs allowed and runs scored. 15-13 at Tropicana Field and 20-7 away from Tropicana Field. They play New York next, the Yankees, which I'm going to be very excited to see that series because I would love to see the Yankees lose a little more for 1. And for 2, the Rays always usually whoop the Yankees in their series. And at number 1, San Diego Padres. They're 34-21, half a game back. 6-4 in the last 10 on a 2-game losing streak. 264 runs scored against 183 runs allowed. Plus 83 run differential. 36-19 would be their expected record. But still, they have had a lot of injuries this year, and 18-10 at home and 16-11 on the road. 18-15 against 500 teams. So San Diego, I think, is number 1 this week. Like I said, Tampa Bay could be number 1 next week. Los Angeles, the Dodgers could be number 1 next week. The Red Sox, White Sox, the Sox could be there next week too. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe, and turn notifications. Like I said, 88% of you that watch these videos in the month of May are not subscribed. So get your life together. Hit that subscribe button, turn notifications, and leave a like on this video. Thank you for watching, and peace.